The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of Green Acres and our guests. These general gardening tips and suggestions may work for you, as well as those from alternative sources. When using any garden products or tools, read and follow all label directions. And learn how to make your yard summer strong at bewatersmart.info.
The Green Acres Garden Podcast is the podcast dedicated to helping gardeners hone their growing skills while we celebrate our love of plants. So whether you're new to growing or a seasoned gardener, you're sure to learn something new. Join the fun as we have conversations with world-class growers, passionate green thumbs, and professional garden experts from Green Acres Nursery and Supply. Listen every week. We'll answer questions you didn't know you had. Hello there and welcome everyone. This is the Green Acres Garden Podcast. My name's Kevin Jordan, your happy host who smells a little like compost. Back in studio for another great episode where we can talk plants. Actually, in this case, we're talking bees.
Oh, yeah.
So, Austin, how's it going, bud?
I am doing great, and I'm psyched because we're talking bees, man. I don't know what it is. I just love talking about bees.
Dude, they're so fascinating. There's always something new to learn.
Cool. Yeah, I learned a bunch of stuff. And, you know, I think I found out I loved it last year when we talked to Tim Dick, and he got me excited about bees, right? And I learned so much about
infectious.
What bees do and the life of a bee and like all the roles and jobs they have. They're fascinating creatures. They're so cool.
We love them. They belong in our gardens everywhere. And so in this week's episode, we're going to talk everything from bumblebees to honeybees to native bees and beyond. We got a great guest. His name's Chris Crittenton. He's of SABA, the Sacramento Area Beekeepers Association.
Yep.
And he was awesome. We had so much fun with him. We made friends right away.
Oh, yeah.
He had a great vibe about him, and it was really cool just to hear his passion and enthusiasm for his hobby of caretaking these bees, of cultivating bees.
Being a beekeeper.
Being a beekeeper, yeah. It was great to learn from somebody who was so passionate about something, just like we are with plants. And so we got to escape that little bubble a little bit and kind of expand our horizons a little bit with bees. And so I had a blast. I got to learn a bunch. I think our listeners are going to enjoy this interview.
I think so too. Okay, so Kevin, I guess this is going to spoil part of the interview, but I learned about a thing that you can do with honey I didn't know you could do. He was talking, so Chris told me about caramelized honey. And I didn't know this existed.
I like caramelized onions, so I'm with you.
I also love caramelized onions. I like caramel. I like anything caramelized. I didn't know you could do it with honey. Now I got to try it. How can
delicious.
I get this?
Yeah, right?
I need to start cooking my honey a little bit.
We got to, that's what's nice. When you talk to more people, the more people you talk to, the more you learn, the more you figure out, I don't know enough.
I know.
So it's really cool to hear about all the fun things he was doing with honey, and just, it sounded delicious. I love it. Honey just goes back. I mean, it's been, imagine living 1,000 years ago. Like, granulated sugar doesn't exist. And then you get your little beak around some honey, a little drop of honey.
Oh, I bet my
dude.
mind would have been blown.
Could you imagine? Yeah. And so people have been using it for so long to do so many different things. I mean, heal wounds and cuts. It's got like antiseptic properties and whatnot. It's pretty cool. It's like a miracle substance that is essentially bee spit and nectar. And so pollen, nectar, and bee spit in a little bit of time. It's really cool. We love the bees because by the end of this interview, you'll either be inspired to become a beekeeper yourself, or just be like, I'm going to get fired up and do what I can just to support the bees. And so, that's our hope.
Let's do it. So we sat down with Chris. He is a member of SABA, the Sacramento Area Beekeepers Association. We met up with him at the Green Acres Nursery and Supply in Elk Grove. Let's go ahead and jump into that interview now. Here we go.
All right, folks, so I'm sitting down with Chris Crittenton of SABA. Chris, first of all, thank you for making time for us. How you doing?
I'm happy to be here. I'm doing good.
Doing great. All right, so please introduce yourself to our listeners. Who are you and what are we going to do today?
Yeah, I'm Chris Crittenton. I am a member of SABA, which is the Sacramento Area Beekeepers. So we're an organization that's about education, and basically we get to share our passion about bees and bee-related knowledge. We have classes and bi-weekly Sunday Zoom meetings. So if you want to be a beekeeper, we have all the resources you can learn.
Right on. I love it. We love bees around here at the podcast and in the garden. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of how you fell in love with bees and maybe why should other people love bees as well?
Yeah, I mean, so I like honey. I mean, honey is sweet and amazing, and if you get it from a local beekeeper, you know it's probably good, which is great because unfortunately it's like olive oil, honey, and I forget what else are the three most like messed with products in the world.
They get diluted.
Right, they
we're
add
getting
sugar.
imposters.
Yeah, they add sugar to it. They do different stuff, and you know, people are going to do what they're going to do. But if you want, you know, pure honey, your best bet is to actually go with a beekeeper. It's antimicrobial. It's antiviral, and it's got a lot of nutrients. So it has a lot of medicinal properties. And then, of course, it tastes good, right?
Oh,
so
yeah.
even if you don't care, like I have it in honey, not because I was like, oh, this is medicinal. I'm like,
Yeah.
honey.
Like Winnie the Pooh style.
Yeah, exactly. Or on a biscuit, like you get a nice
dude.
hot biscuit and then honey.
That's good stuff.
Yeah, some of our beekeepers will have caramelized honey, so honey that has been heated some to make it caramelize. And they will actually just drizzle that on like vanilla ice cream.
Oh, how's that? Pretty
Very good, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if you have no skill in the kitchen, which would probably be me, something that I just can pour on something and it be amazing and it's impressive. Like it's not just like, oh, I scooped ice cream. It's like I scooped ice cream and I added something delicious. Like I don't think I have the most refined palates, but I have friends that are like wine and can actually taste different things I enjoy. But you can actually taste the differences in depending on what plants the honey.
Yeah. We've done that with our students.
Yeah.
You get the orange blossom
Yep,
honey.
exactly.
You get the clover honey.
Yeah.
The wildflower mix.
Yeah. They have different flavors, so you can also get like different intensities. Honey can show up from a very almost clear looking to almost like a black, depending on what they were on.
Everything in between.
Yeah, and at the end of the year, they tend to be darker honey. So the fall harvest tends to be a darker honey, and it has a more intense taste to it.
Where does this delicious honey come from? Like, we know the bees make it, but how do they make it?
Yeah, so bees will. So most of the bees are actually female. There are boy bees that are called drones, but most of the bees are female, and when they become older bees, they become what's called foragers. So they go out and they'll visit lots of flowers, and they will collect. There's a number of things they collect, but basically nectar and pollen. So the nectar gets stored, and then they process it to the point where the moisture drops low enough that it's stable.
So the moisture evaporates out and
Right.
it just thickens down?
Right, and then at that point, it's shelf stable basically, and they can cap it. So if you see a honey frame, if you sort of see like the center part usually is bees, and then there'll be pollen, and then there can be nectar, which is like liquid looking, but not capped, and it's not as thick as honey.
It's still cooking?
Right, so you can kind of tell the difference between nectar and honey is if you shake the frame, the nectar will come out because it's liquid. The honey usually won't, unless
Sticky
maybe
and
it's
thick.
110, it might be hot enough, but generally it's much more sticky, and that makes it stable. So that's how bees are able to store food for the winter.
And that's what honey ultimately is for them?
Yeah, exactly. And then when they need it again, they basically just add water and they can dilute it to the point where they use it as a food source again. So when we overwinter them, they will produce enough honey to survive. So even in California, we don't necessarily have huge winters, but in other places, they have them in Russia, right? Those bees are gonna stock up a whole bunch of winter stuff, and then they just, cluster and stay not dead or warm.
Yeah.
They stay warm together, and they eat through their food until they get to the point where it's getting sunny again, and they can go out and get more food.
Very cool. Man, I'm loving it. So interesting. Now, you brought up that they actually will go out and drink water as well. It gets really ripping hot here in the summer.
Yep.
Is there anything that a normie can do
Yeah.
to kind of just support the bees, give them some little extra drink here and there?
Yeah, so the things I recommend and other people recommend too, if you want to help bees. So I'm primarily talking about honeybees.
Yes.
So honeybees aren't actually native to California. They were brought over from Europe mostly, but other places too. And we keep them as beekeepers. So honeybees, if you want to help them, things you can do is you can put water out when it's hot. Ideally, you want to put like rocks or even cork because they need it to be either shallow or for them to have something they can walk on so they don't drown. That's really helpful. Having plants that flower different times of the year.
Now you're speaking my language.
Yeah, so at the beginning of the year, when they've made it through winter, they grow their population. And so having, not cutting down the flowers that bloom early, even if it's like ones maybe we consider weeds, but early on in the year, there's not all the different pollen sources.
So even those flowering weeds, they'll utilize
Right.
those, clovers and whatnot?
Exactly. So if you don't get rid of them, that's awesome. If you have plants that have flowers different times of the year, so like some of the herbs actually flower sort of on some of the off times.
Yeah.
So that can also be really helpful for people to have, so they have food sources.
If you've seen a rosemary plant bloom, it's
Yeah.
like a bee magnet.
Lavender.
All those, yeah.
I've also seen, I think bottlebrush has,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
not really an herb, but it's one of the like sort of later season stuff. So if you have flowering plants that flower at different times of the year, that's helpful.
Great advice.
One of the things I tell you if you want to help native bees, leave some of the leaves. So honeybees, we keep in boxes and they're a giant hive, and that's how they reproduce, is in the giant hive. Many bees, I think there's like 1,200 to 1,400 native California bees.
Wow.
Most of them are they don't have giant hives. They will end up putting eggs in either the ground or in wood or in the like stems.
Yeah.
So things you can do to help them, native plants is the best, right? Because they have evolved with them.
We love native plants around here.
Right, and talk to your nursery to
get
advice on that.
What's nice is there's the opportunity to get plants as well as seeds, I feel like, is increasing when it comes to natives.
Yeah, and then don't cut off all the stems. So if you have plants that have stems, some of the bees will use those stems to overwinter. So leave some of the stems until it's at least like 60 degrees every day, and at whatever point it gets warmer, because at that point usually the bees have then emerged.
Okay.
So you don't have to keep the stems all the way through summer, but try not to leave some of them. Or
Just creates habitat. And you
Right.
mentioned leave the leaves. And
Yeah.
so I'm assuming on the ground or what?
Yeah, so I don't pick up my leaves, other than I actually put them in places that I want them to like compost and
Yeah.
do that. But people, if you want a cleaner look, you can use, like, even in the corner of your yard, if you have an area where you just leave the leaves and you're not trampling them, there are some native pollinators that end up doing stuff in the ground and burrowing, and so not having it torn up and having a place for that for them to emerge basically after winter is helpful too.
It's a great excuse too. Hey, sorry, I'm not raking those leaves today, hon. It's for the bees.
Yeah.
Let me get back to doing something fun.
The joke that shows up on many of the beekeeping things that I follow all the time is like, the leaves are for the pollinators, and then they turn out the dishes are for the pollinators.
Yeah. All your chores.
Exactly.
Like, how can I tie this
the
back
dirty
to bee
laundry is
health?
for the pollinators. So like, no, but it actually does help.
That is cool.
Yeah.
Right on. Yeah, because we love the honeybees, but it's cool that we want all the bees as much as possible, and the natives I think are equally important.
Yeah, and there's different bees will pollinate different things. So honeybees are really good general pollinators, but there's even stuff that they don't pollinate. So like tomatoes aren't pollinated by honeybees, they're pollinated by buzz pollination.
Those little vibrators.
Right, exactly. So like bumblebees, they basically go on the plant, they grab the plant, and then they shake it, and they're able to shake out the pollen. There's a really cool video on PBS. It's like 5 minutes if you like Google like buzz pollination, that shows it sort of in slow motion. So in order to get the pollen out, they actually have to shake it. Whereas honeybees, they're like generalists. They literally just land on it, and they have hairs on their body, and so the pollen gets, clumps on them for that. They don't have to shake to get it in it. They just have to like rub against stuff or have it fall on them.
Sticky.
Yeah.
Very cool. I'm very curious. If someone's listening right now and they're curious, they're like, man, this is kind of cool. He got into it. He's been doing it for a few years. Sounds like have you harvested some honey?
Yeah.
Okay. So if they're feeling that vibe and they want to get into that energy as well, I kind of feel like, gardening may lead to beekeeping.
Yeah.
Beekeeping may also lead right back to more gardening.
Yeah.
So we may have some gardeners who are interested, and what would you say, where does somebody start if they're a complete newbie?
The really great thing is there's lots of resources to learn. So like if you're in the Sacramento area, Saba is great. If you're somewhere in California but not Sacramento, the California Master Beekeeper Program has outstanding classes. And the lowest level on that one is, I think it's only $50 to do. You get access to all of the low-level classes, which will teach you all of the 101.
It's not bad.
Yeah, no, it's great. And then, like I said, if you're in Sacramento, Saba has really amazing resources. So there is book learning. You do need to learn some stuff like what are you looking for in a hive. So when you do an inspection, like how do I know if I have a queen? You might be able to spot the queen, but more likely what you'll end up spotting is the young eggs and young larvae. And if you spot that, then you know you had a queen 3 days ago. So you don't necessarily have to see your queen when you inspect.
So you can see other signs.
Right.
Little detective work.
Right. So a lot of beekeeping is figuring out sort of what you want to do. There's a lot of ways to beekeep, right? So there's a lot of ways it can work. It's not like this is the only way, but there is some stuff you have to learn. So if you figure out that you don't have a queen, then you need to give them eggs or a new queen because they can't continue. So it's like you do have to figure out some of this stuff. So take classes. There's some great resources. There are local beekeeping organizations in a lot of counties. So
even if you're not in our region, there's
just Google.
Usually people locally.
Yeah, whatever your county is, whatever, and local beekeepers. There's a lot of stuff you can find online too to learn about it. The thing I would note about that is you're not entirely certain how reliable it is, but also beekeeping is like real estate. It's local. So it may not be that what you're doing is wrong, but the timelines will be completely different. So if you're in Canada and you have snow, their timelines of when you need to check for things and when bees are going out to forage is going to be different than in a place like Sacramento where we don't have long periods of time where bees are stuck in the hive.
Yeah.
So some of the information may be similar, but the timing of when stuff happens in your area will vary locally and will vary on the weather. So even year to year, when we had that weird year where during mating season we had a lot of rain, that kind of messed up some of the timelines for people.
You mentioned how some of the things you got to do to get started. Is there a better time of the year if someone's like, I'm going to order up my bees and things like that? Is there a crucial time of the year to do that?
Yeah, if you want to start this year, you basically want to order your supplies now, and you probably want to get your orders in for beekeeping. You're going to need a hive setup, so the boxes. I strongly suggest having protective equipment, so I beekeep in a jacket with the veil on it, and then usually we recommend at least having gloves, if not wearing them. The first time I ended up installing my package, I actually was pretty relaxed. I knew when they're in the package, they're calm, they're just looking for a home. So I ended up not using gloves and it was totally fine. But when in doubt, use gloves.
Yeah, protect yourself.
And I also was installing a package from Known Genetics. One of the things commercial beekeepers select for is for calm bees, right? So they will select for calm bees usually, and then good honey production often, and some of them have some other stuff. But if you're going from known people, that is part of their criteria. And so first-year beekeepers a lot of times can't take much, if any, honey. If you're starting later in the year, you're probably not going to get any. It's possible you could. There are some times where bees are there's a lot of pollen flow.
Is it usually that second, third year, or what?
Well, yeah, so the second or third year, if you have drawn comb, or if you start with drawn comb, then sometimes you can get it. I have seen first-year beekeepers get honey, but I tell people not to expect it because so much energy has to go into building out comb.
Fair enough.
But if you start with a nuke, that's the other way of doing it.
That's the nucleus one?
Yeah, the nucleus colony. So it's like 4 or 5 frames. It's already built out, and it will have brood already in there. So instead of a queen coming into a frame that is not built out and there are no brood, the workers have to build out the frame. They also have to increase their population. Instead of starting from scratch, you actually have frames that are already built. So you're much more likely to be able to get honey immediately because you already have an established colony that has wax and has baby brood that's already emerging and filtering through. some people like that because it's already existing. One thing that's nice about starting with a package, though, is you actually get to see the full development.
I think that kind of sounds intriguing to me. It's like I don't need to get honey that first year. It's like I think just there's got to be a lot of satisfaction and joy in just watching it come together.
Yeah, and oftentimes you can get some honey, but you're just not going to get like pounds of it the first year if you want them to survive.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I'm loving it. So right now is actually a really good time to kind of start planning out if you were going to do it.
Yeah.
Don't wait.
Yeah, and there is some things you need to learn. So like Saba's first class Saba has a 4-class series for beekeeping basics, basically, and they're classes over the year. So it will deal with the things you want to do. So class 1 is on February 23rd.
Coming up.
Yeah, exactly. So we do basic bee biology, what beekeeping equipment you need, choosing your location, like all of the stuff if you know nothing about beekeeping, this will be a good introduction. So you do want to learn some things and figure out what you need to purchase. You can also buy bees from beekeepers. Sabas have a number of beekeepers that they publish that are selling bees or splits.
With some of your association members and friends, people create relationships and whatnot.
Yeah, exactly. Because you have to get bees. There is swarms where people can recover bees. That's also another thing that Saba does. Please don't spray bees. Say
that one more time.
Please don't spray bees.
Thank you.
Love
it.
If you see a pile of bees that are hanging out on a fence or on a tree and
people freak.
it
looks intimidating, right?
It does, but if you don't mess with them, they're not going to do anything. They're basically just looking for a new home. So we have report a swarm. I've got 2 or 3 swarms last year. I've also assisted on a number of swarms from some more advanced beekeepers where we were actually cutting into walls and pulling out stuff. But they're just the pile of bees on the ground. We're happy to come and get them.
So a lot of our listeners and on this podcast, we like to teach as much as we can about gardening, growing, and the different methods of doing it. But one of the methods that we really kind of fall back on oftentimes is organic gardening methods.
Yeah.
Even to the point of maybe using only organic sprays, or in some case only spraying certain things at certain times, or only or in some cases no spraying at all.
Ideally.
So, what are your thoughts on organic gardening as it pertains to our bees?
Yeah. Please do it. A lot of the chemicals we use to try to control insects kill insects.
Yeah.
And bees are part of what end up getting injured in that. And if you like having, fruit, you need pollination, right?
Yeah.
So you have to unless you want to go out there with a paintbrush and move pollen to the female part of which nobody's going to do, we're not going to have apples and cherries and almonds.
Your peach is like a $45 peach at that point.
Right. So that's not good for anybody. So saving pollinators is really important, and a big part of that is not killing them.
Yeah.
So the chemicals that we use or overuse are problematic. If you have to spray, maybe do it at night after the bees have gone to bed, so bees don't fly at night.
Good to know.
Honeybees, at least. So you can do it that way, but trying to avoid spraying in places where they'll be is helpful, and try to limit usage at all is ideal.
I appreciate it. If someone's listening right now and they're maybe like, this kind of sounds cool, I'm a little curious, like this is your final push. Why should we be taking care of our bees, and why is it cool to be a beekeeper?
Yeah, I just really like beekeeping, and I've enjoyed it. I didn't know much about it, but you can literally know nothing to having honey 9 months later. It's a very cool thing, and you get to watch your hive grow. It's like an ant farm, but even better because it's making you food.
Yeah.
And it's also helping make our food. Part of the reason there's so many bees in California is because without commercial beekeeping, we wouldn't have almonds like we do. If you want to have a really cool hobby where you can get wax, you can get honey, you can make lip balm out of the wax. There's a lot of really cool stuff you can do with it. And like I said, just honey straight from the comb tastes so much better than what you're going to get from a jar that's been processed.
Yeah.
It's more intense. You'll be able to tell and taste the differences between even the same year, beekeepers in different areas. So Saba, one of the most popular meetings is the honey tasting meeting. Everybody brings in honey, and there's jars, and then
It's like no two are identical.
yeah, even though it's the same year, it could be like Elk Grove here, Elk Grove there, but like when they harvested might have been a different time of the year temporally, and then also the climate of like subclimates. The bees can fly a number of miles, but if this bee hive is near these plants more than this bee that's like in an urban area where there's lots of different kinds of plants as opposed to just sort of less ones over here, totally different tastes. Like that's how you get varietals, is if you pull honey that's bees have just visited one, it will taste different. And if you have a cool enough palate, you can do that. So yeah, check out Saba if you want to go in a hive. Our class number 2 has a in the hive portion. So if you want to do a hive dive, you can meet beekeepers. I invite people to come into my hives, even because I like showing off bees. But that's also a popular one. And then the products of the hive is also a super popular class where you get to make stuff from beeswax, so balms and lipstick or chapstick out of, you literally know what's going into the product because you mixed so many ounces of this and so many ounces of that and put it on a double boiler and then poured it into a container and you put it on your lips.
Oh,
it's like pretty cool.
That is very cool. There's so much that can be done with bees. The way you're talking about it, too, it reminds me how some of the gardeners that we talk to, how they have so much pride and satisfaction when they're showing off their gardens, like of all sizes and stuff. People send us pictures of just little pot-ups or little corner gardens, and they're so proud of it. I kind of feel like you're giving me the same vibes about your hive and just like bringing people in it. Like, do you feel that way when you show it off to people? A little sense of like giddiness, a little pride, a little joy. Yeah, and like I made an actual beeswax candle. Like this candle I made, it's out of actual beeswax. Yeah. Like, how cool is that? It smells better when you burn it. Like, it's a clean burn. There was a reason that they used to use beeswax, or still use it in churches, is it burns clean. Yeah, and it's also good for mental health. They've actually showed there's Hives for Heroes is a program for vets to get into beekeeping because it's shown to help people with PTSD. So if you're a vet and you want to get into beekeeping, you can get resources to get that. Get into that, because it can help. Yeah, why not? Well, Chris, this has been a wonderful interview, man. I've learned so much. I loved bees before this, but now I'm like really set. Every time I talk to a bee person, I feel like I learned something new, and just the excitement, the passion from people. It exudes like wax out of your thorax. Thank you so much for being an amazing guest. I really appreciate having you. Excellent. Thank you so much. And as they say in the Master Beekeeper program, be well.
All right, well, we are back from an interview with Chris. Big thank you to Chris. Now, Kevin, I'm going to take it over to you. What are your big takeaways from talking with Chris, and what do you think we should be thinking about with bees now? That we need to support the bees, whether they're the honey bees, right, that we cultivate like Chris, or they're just the native bees, because they're amazing as well, and there's so many of them, so many different varieties and species. It's pretty incredible to learn about. The bees need our help, and we can do some stuff. So either you can do what he does and learn more about bees and share that passion with others. But if you really want to support the bees, both native and those lovely honeybees, we can do some things in our own garden. So he talked about leaving the leaves, right? So maybe having areas of your garden where it's not super tidy. That way some of those ground-dwelling bees can survive and nest. That is pretty awesome. And just the flowers that we plant, keeping them fed throughout the season as much as you can. So to incorporate spring bloomers, summer bloomers, late summer, fall, even early, maybe through winter. The more that you can create food for them, the more likely you are to be supporting them. And so I think it's a big thing. So catmint, echinacea, agastache, salvia, lavender, rosemary, lantana, zinnias, sunflowers, asters, bee balm, Shasta daisies, and beyond. There's so much that you can plant that will bring them in. There's edible flowers and plants that you can plant. Ooh, what's an edible one? What is it? Mint is incredible. Okay. Rosemary, I brought up, is an herb. Basil, we talked about this. Basil is a killer for bringing them in. Even cilantro, if you let that bolt. So there's some things you can do, but of course there's annuals, there's perennials. There's actually even trees and shrubs
that you can plant that'll actually support bees. So dogwoods, redwoods, even fruit trees can be helpful. Of course, our deciduous ones will bloom for a short period, but even your citrus, when those bloom here pretty soon, those will just be like bee magnets. So this is just a scratch on the surface.
It sounds like almost anything with a flower.
For the most part, they are attracted oftentimes to, I think it's to like white flowers and blue and purple flowers and some others as well. But you can definitely tell some that they just go after hard.
Sure.
But the ones I listed, those are good ones to start with. But there's so many out there. So I would encourage you to, when you're planning out your gardens, your landscape, to incorporate things that are going to bloom at different points in the season, and that'll be really helpful as well. And one thing he brought up, we always are preaching organic methods out on the podcast here. But so it's nice. So if you do need to spray, if you got some aphid or you got something going on, Chris mentioned he's like, wait until the nighttime to do some of your spraying, or when the sun starts to go down, because the bees aren't as active then. So you're less likely to be spraying and getting them when you don't need to. So if you do have to spray, maybe you can be a little more deliberate with where you spray and when you spray, according to the bees. And in some cases, there's a lot of gardeners out there who are like, I just do no spray, and I'll just battle it out the best I can. So everyone has their own way about doing it, but I think if we all just do a little bit, it's like saving the monarchs, planting for butterflies as well. There are plants that we can plant that will truly not just give us a ton of enjoyment, but can actually support the wildlife in our regions, in our communities. And so I think it's pretty cool just to be a little tiny part of that.
Well, there are just so many bee enthusiasts out there. So if you're inspired and you want to check it out, maybe just learn more, just reach out to the bee communities in your area. There's going to be, like Chris said, these localized bee communities and associations that are going to help you out. And it's so important to think local, because the advice and the seasonality and the weather, the climate, it all changes based on where you're at.
Just like gardening.
I know. It's an amazing thing. Just connect with those around you. We're all one big ecosystem. So let's do our part and do what we can.
Save the trees, save the bees.
There we
go. And that's the sacbeekeepers.org. That's Saba's website. So if you're in our region and you're looking to reach out and find some information, sacbeekeepers.org. It's pretty cool. Ton of information on there if you want to get connected. But I'm telling you, it's time for us to be out of here.
All right.
So thank you so much to our guest, Chris. It was so much fun meeting you and talking bees. I love getting fired up with people, whether it's plants or insects or anything. It's really cool to see people's enthusiasm come out. I loved it. He was glowing, man. Until next week, garden friends, be out in that garden.
There we go.
Always don't be misbehaving. But have a great week, garden friends. Please share. We'd love to be out and into more earbuds and earpods and whatnot. We'd love it. So share us with a friend. And until next week, garden friends, happy gardening to you all, and never stop growing. Don't
Is that
misbehaving.
What's his character's name?
Mama said don't, but I did it anyway. Misbehaving. Oh, that's Uncle Billy,
Yes.
Uncle Bobby,
Uncle Billy.
Uncle Baby Billy.
Baby Billy.
Uncle Baby Billy. So, a new season's coming.